Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel, and if you're new, welcome. As always, we're here to give you some intellectual bullets for good trouble, as always. So, are you having anxiety about what's going on or what will perhaps not go on over in Ukraine with Putin making moves or not making moves, saying he's making moves or not making moves? You know, in this kind of situation, you might be following the news and it's like, where are these battlements going? What is the GPS, showing? You're just kind of trying to follow or track or maybe trying to turn off the noise. But really, in these kind of situations, you kind of want to get into the heads of the people. Like, you want to know, like, what is Putin thinking? What in general are Ukrainians thinking, Russians thinking, and then of course you can't really generalize and you can't really you can't say like this is what all Russians think and what all Ukrainians think. And in general, if you did not know, Ukraine is severely divided. This is probably why there is such a crisis at this point, is that for years, like for a decade or more, politically, that country essentially is like, sort of like the United States, the whole red versus blue states. They have orange and blue. That was the whole Orange Revolution, like their Orange Party, that was the Orange Revolution. And so you want to get into kind of their mindset. And just a couple years ago, I randomly picked up this book. Don't judge a book by its cover because this is a horrible cover, but a random Russian 19th century novel. It's not Dostoevsky. It's Nikolay Gogol, almost like the original Google, but Gogol. Anyhow, this guy is a Russian novelist with Ukrainian origins, writing this book in 1842. Now, this is just a prescription for anxiety for maybe like 1% or 0.1% of you kind of like nerdy people out there. But if you want to get into the mindset, probably, of generally what's going on, you got to go back to an origin point that, before, let's go before the timeline of even before Putin was born, before the fall of the Romanov dynasty, even before the start of the Soviet Empire, back to 1842 when, things were kind of sort of swinging and on its last, legs of the Russian Empire. And I think we kind of get a sense, because when I read it, I was like, oh my God, Russian people are sort of like Korean people. Oh my gosh, like what's going on with like the ills of Russian society is kind of like the ills of Korean society. And dang, like this is what happens to societies that lead us to points where, like here in 2022, we're confused. If we haven't been following Russia and Ukraine, like a lot of you guys might be like, oh my god, like what's going on? Like why is this happening? Well, as we cover a lot on this channel, you don't take care of your society, you leave it decayed to open to corruption, and you leave like a shadow economy, shadow government, shadow forms of hierarchy. You get to this point where, at a crisis point, it is an emergency. And you can't really kind of do anything about it at that point. That is like a good choice. You only have these hard choices. And at least if you're sitting there and you're just like, oh my God, I can't really do anything about it, but I don't want to watch the news. I don't want anything escapist. But I sort of want something escapist, and you sort of want to go back in time, and it's like Wuthering Heights meets Sense and Sensibility meets Edgar Allan Poe meets Charles Dickens. We're going to go over this. This is going to be like the first book review / current events / let's try to reduce our anxiety about Russia, Ukraine, and Putin. The reason why this really jogged a memory for me is that remember a few years ago when Putin did make those aggressive moves into Crimea, and I was at a startup center here in Seoul, and there was this dude, like, just a very young guy also doing a startup and very like modern looking, not saying like I was expecting like some guy from like Russia or Ukraine to like not be modern looking, but very kind of like progressive looking. And then, I'm just assuming that many people on this channel are a little bit more progressive, and I just naively assumed that everybody did not like Putin. And then I just made that, comment. I was like, yeah, how crazy, like what the heck is he doing, And he defended Putin. I didn't really know him that well, but I know he's not like some warmonger, like not some crazy person. And he really defended Putin, and I was kind of shocked, but I wanted to hear him because he sounded very rational. And so this is, I think, a moment for us to really understand, because you can't like, I really can't stand a lot of these kind of like so-called liberal progressives who like shut down at any kind of like, mention of like if somebody's like, oh, like they're defending, oh my god, like how can you even like support that, blah blah blah, because you immediately then disempower yourself, because you're not going to win them over, and actually you're going to basically be in their line of fire, and you don't even know why or how they're shooting or attacking you and what they're willing to die for. And if you look at what Putin did actually during the 2000s, he basically doubled the GDP of Russia. And so for a lot of people, that's food on the table, that's economic growth. You put money in people's pockets and opportunity. That goes a long way. And a lot of that is also pride. And what I saw out of that guy was something about Putin being the only guy to really be able to restore that kind of pride and honor in the national identity, and also to back it up with money, GDP power. Now what we're seeing is actually Putin, I think, is kind of like, shucking and jiving a little bit, because the GDP is going down, the oil prospects are going down. There's something probably like he's kind of, like I see a nervous Putin. So we can go into that in a different video, because, we're getting into like more of the history before Putin. Anyhow, so I wanted to kind of get into a sense of like where the mindset of this region was, because I don't know exactly like how it is today, and I don't know exactly like how, this book may have represented everybody back then, but what I do see as, writers reflecting the zeitgeist of the time and being a social critic of the society, wow, a lot of insights. Now, I don't want to like ruin it all. First of all, this cover is horrible. It's not like, it's nothing like the cover, okay? Actually. So it's called Dead Souls, and nothing like the title. This title sucks. And this guy apparently was like this really kind of like genius kind of a writer that used like gore and sort of like spectacle, and so he was sort of like that Edgar Allan Poe, and he used his Ukrainian influences, and then also he was a critic of the corruption of the Russian Empire. So, right up our alley here on this channel. Now, this book, reason why I think it's also very relevant right now is like if you have seen Inventing Anna, the story of Anna Delvey, a.k.a. Anna Sorokin on Netflix, about the con artist who scammed her way into elite New York society by pretending she was a German heiress when she was essentially a Russian immigrant to Germany, and then she went to the UK and then moved to New York. I think she kind of had an internship in Paris along the way. And this is a very similar story about a con man. So this is not saying like, not to make a stereotype of Russian con people, but I think the point is that the author was trying to make is that society had devolved to such a point where cons, artifice, trickery, that was the norm. If you didn't trick and work on appearances and surfaces first, even if you didn't want to, you couldn't survive. And that, I think, is what is the real world normal person's example of like how a vulnerable situation we can get into, like in a 2022 Russia-Ukraine conflict, if you follow me, where you can't stand in values anymore, so you have to honor a dictator. If you can't stand your own ground, you have in your own real power, in your community power, your own personal power, you must follow the power of the king or the dictator. And you always have to express your loyalty in more and more perverse ways to the king or the dictator. And that in real life, how it starts to eventually move and solidify there is when you start to give away your own personal power by not focusing on the intrinsic value, but being focused on the extrinsic value, the artifice, the external. So, what is this book about? Totally about the con and the external value and what you can get away with, just like Anna Delvey, just like how she conned everybody by just slipping $100 bill tips to make it look like she was a rich German heiress. This dude was trying to make the ultimate con of the 19th century. I don't want to give away everything, but basically, if you don't want to read the book, I'm going to give you a summary where you don't have to read the book, and if you want to read the book, hopefully I won't give away everything. But I will give away the mystery of this book. This book is kind of like an unfinished book. The dude burned the ending. Yeah. The last sentence ends midway. It's not finished. Apparently he did some strange kind of like their version of Ayushurska retreat or something, and then he went crazy and then he burned the rest of the book. So it's not finished, but it's still good. So what was his con? This is so weird. So basically, like, in these days you had serfs, so that's kind of like the in-between of a slave and servant, well, basically indentured servant. And so landowners, and I guess, like, you had people who were, super wealthy and even not very, very wealthy have serfs. And it's registered in the government, and you have to pay taxes on your serfs. And they were called souls, and this is why they're called dead souls. Now, serfs are people, and they would pass away. But the census, it's like old Russia, and, this is before the internet, so the government wouldn't update their registry every year. It would take a long time for them to finally update. But meanwhile, you had to keep paying taxes on your serfs, even if they had passed away. And so people just put up with it, and they just had to, pay their taxes. So it kind of sucked, but you just had to do it. Well, this dude, the main guy in this novel, his name is Chichikov. So Chichikov is this kind of con man. And he's just like this elusive character, and you just don't know where he came from. And he's going around like, just traveling around, like trying to find like some of these like people who look like either they had big estates and they were like a little, like all those like, old like Dickens or Emily Dickinson novels or stories where like, those old aristocrats that fallen on hard times. So he's trying to like, kind of see if like there's these people who have like on the register a lot of serfs that had passed away, but that these people were still paying taxes for. He'd go to them and say like, hey dude, I'll buy your serfs on the record that have passed away, and y'all don't have to pay the taxes on them anymore. I'll take them, but shh, let's keep it a secret. I'll take care of all the expenses for the paperwork. You don't gotta worry about a thing. Hey, like I'll take care of it. And he thought that it was just gonna be easy. And some people were just like, wait, what's going on? So let me kind of read you a passage. He made plain to her that the transfer or the purchase would be recorded only on paper, and that the souls would be registered as if they were alive. But whatever do you need them for? Said the old woman, looking at him wide-eyed. That's really my business. But after all, they're dead. So, who's saying they're alive? It's because they're dead, they're a loss for you. You're paying for them, and now I'm going to save you the trouble and expense. Do you understand? And I'll not only save you that, but over and above it, I'll give you 15 rubles. Well, is it clear now? Really, I don't know, said the old woman, slowly and deliberately. You see, I've never yet sold any dead people. Of course not. It would be nothing short of a miracle if you had sold them to anyone. Or do you think they're actually good for something? No, I don't think that. What could they be good for? They're not good for anything. The only problem I'm having is that they're already dead. So this guy is offering something that is just way out of bounds and really strange. Like, why would he want to buy somebody's old serfs that are no longer around and just the records? Well, essentially what he's trying to do is build up this paper record of like assets. So he wants to pretend that the serfs are still alive by actually having the people, because you kind of can't verify, like maybe the death certificates and the serf certificates were separate departments. So you can kind of still say like, oh, hey, dude, I got like 1,000 serfs, and people be like, dang, he's got like, whoa, he must, he's like rich, like you just buy like some old plot of land, and then you say like, oh, I got like 1,000 serfs, and then so this guy was trying to set up sort of like an Anna Delvey thing, like, oh, he's like some big old aristocrat, and then he was trying to marry into money. And then on top of that, he was then going to try to get a loan on the collateral of the serfs. So a con. So basically, I'm just fast forwarding. That was essentially what he was trying to run here. And that is like the ultimate kind of thing where the only way you were able to do that is he was playing on, number one, people's kind of like stupidity and greed. They were trying to get something for nothing, like a too good to be true. Because here, the old woman grew thoughtful. She saw that it really did seem to be a profitable proposition, except that it was too new and unfamiliar. And therefore, she began to feel very apprehensive that she was somehow being swindled by this buyer. After all, he had arrived from God knows where, and late at night to boot. Well, what do you say, dear lady? Shall we shake hands on it? Said Chichikov. Really, my dear sir, I've never yet had occasion to sell deceased folk. I've let some living ones go 3 years ago. Was it 2 young girls to the archpriest, 100 rubles each, and he thanked me very much. They turned out to be such wonderful workers. They can weave napkins all by themselves. Come now, we're not talking about the living. God be with them. I'm asking for the dead ones. Really, I'm afraid it being the first time that I'll take a loss somehow. Maybe you're trying to deceive me, dear sir, and they're somehow worth more. So they go on and on back and forth, and then finally she caves in. She says, "All right then, I'm ready to let you have them for 15 rubles in banknotes. Only mind, dear sir, you don't forget about those contracts. If you have occasion to be buying rye or buckwheat flour or goats or slaughtered cattle, then please don't forget me." "No, dear lady, I won't forget you," he said, his hand wiping away the sweat that was running down his face in rivulets. He inquired whether she might not have some legal agent or acquaintance in town whom she could authorize to take care of the deed or purchase, and everything connected with it. What a freaking con, man. So he goes around, and as he starts to collect more of these assets, and it looks like he's kind of, getting more and more wealthy, he then starts to try to build his political capital, political connections, just like Anna Delvey did, and increase his con, and then he gets found out in one area, then he moves somewhere else, and then he tries again, and then something happens. Now, this is supposed to sort of be like Dante's Inferno, reimagined in this kind of Russian atmosphere. Now, I just wanted to go over the last part because I think this is essentially the warning that was not really heeded, and I think in general, the 19th century gave us some messages that we did not heal as a world in the 20th century that we really need to fix, now. Otherwise, we're doomed. So, it says, so the prince comes. So now we're really saying that even, back then they thought royalty was essentially like an extension of God. There was a mandate from heaven. So that was how they ruled. They were saying that, that's where they got their authority from. They're essentially a representative of the gods. And so the message here being essentially is not even royalty can fix the decrepit situation of how society has decayed. So even though this is a critique on Russian imperialism, royalty, they're giving a sense that even Russian royalty who wants to fix it can't fix it. So who's going to be able to fix it? Okay, so this is sad because this also sounds like it could be written in 2022. This is the prince's appeal to the public, saying that he's basically given up. The authorities can't even do anything. He says, "Here is my appeal. I know that there are no means, no threats, no punishments sufficient to eradicate wrongdoing. It is already too deeply rooted. The dishonest business of taking bribes has become a necessity, and a need even for those who were certainly not born to be dishonest. I know that by now it is almost impossible for many people to swim against the current. But now I must, at the decisive and sacred moment when it is essential to save our fatherland, when every citizen must endure everything and sacrifice everything, I must issue a call at least to those in whose breasts a Russian heart still beats, and to whom the word nobleness is comprehensible to some degree. What good is served by speaking here about which of us is most to blame? The point is that the time has come for us to save our country. Our country is already perishing, not from an incursion of 20 foreign tribes, but from ourselves. Apart from the lawful government, another way of governing has already come into being. and is infinitely more powerful than any lawful one. Its own conditions have been established. Everything has been assigned a price, and even the prices have been made a matter of common knowledge. And no ruler, though he be wiser than all other lawgivers and rulers, is strong enough to right this wrong, however much he may try to curtail the activities of bad officials by appointing other officials to oversee them. Everything will fail until each of us begins to feel that just as at the time when the people rose and took up arms against their enemies, so likewise he must rise up against wrongdoing. As a Russian, as one bound to you by kinship, by common ancestry, I am now turning to you. I am turning to those of you who have some understanding of what constitutes nobleness of thought. I invite you to remember the duty that awaits a person in whatever position he occupies. I invite you to make a closer examination of your duty and the obligations of your official position on this earth, because all of us now have a dim conception of it, and we hardly... And this is where the book ends, mid-sentence. But he's essentially saying that the real government, the real laws, essentially have disappeared, and that this corrupt system has taken over. And that the system of bribery, corruption has been pretty much now been so well established that everybody knows its rules, a.k.a. etiquette, right? So now people in society from all levels knows how much bribes are, but they won't really call it that. It's more of like etiquette. They'll know like who's really in charge, but they won't call it abuse of power. It's etiquette. They'll know who really makes the decisions. And that was written in 1842. And now it's 2022. And now we're faced with some weird things going on again with Russia and Ukraine. Anyhow, so if you want to check this book out, check out the link below. Maybe it will come to you in a different cover, or you can probably get the ebook. It's definitely worth a read, and it'll transport you to the time before any electricity, social media. It's a different feeling than kind of like the UK-ish novels, but similar. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the Russian version of like Charles Dickens. Kind of cool. And you know what? I mean, who has the time for Dostoevsky? But this is worth it. All right, guys. Share your comments below. We'll see you next time. Like, share, and subscribe. Bye-bye.